Welcome to DIYing America, the show where we explore Civic Hub building and highlight the people leading these innovative efforts across the country. I'm your host, June Cleese, and on each episode, we meet inspiring folks who are weaving and strengthening our civic fabric. Their stories, experiences, and ideas offer valuable insights into how all of us can contribute to a stronger, healthier, and more unified American Republic over time. And on today's episode, we're going to meet Charles Lieske. He is the executive director of Mediation West, a community mediation center in rural Nebraska. Beyond his local work, he serves as treasurer for the National Association for Community Mediation. He is a board member and trainer with the Nebraska Mediation Association, and collaborates with national initiatives, including the Trust Network, Princeton's Bridging Divides Initiative, the Divided Community Project, and Better Together America. Charles is currently exploring how community mediation centers can strengthen partnerships with state and national organizations while developing local civic hubs that foster dialogue, collaboration, and deeper community engagement. Let's get the conversation started. Well, hi, Charles. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I'm really happy to meet you. This is the first time we're meeting, so I'm really looking forward to hearing more about you and your story of how you got to the place where you're doing a civic hub and kind of some of your hopes and dreams about it.
I'm excited to share that as well.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and get started. So I always like to ask my guests, who or what in your youth role modeled or inspired you towards civic action as you went through life? So sort of thinking
Yeah.
about those first, 10, 20 years of your life.
Yeah. Definitely, I would have to say it was my mother who influenced that. She was a public servant, worked for the state of Nebraska. She was a union member with the state organization. She built what in Nebraska is called the Adult Protective Services Program. So similar to what people do in child welfare,
Right.
she was working with adults on some people who were vulnerable or maybe being abused or exploited and those kinds of things. And she really built that program for the state. She came into that at a time where they were separating out child welfare from the adult welfare interests. And through that process, she was very interested in politics. And so she was always looking at candidates and which candidates, especially state government-based candidates, which ones um, are going to do the best job of representing the people. And in her mind, too, especially the people who may be more vulnerable in that. And so she approached life and politics from a way of being able to hold space with elected officials and people who would have um, the stature in the community, and also be able to sit and hold space with people who had homes that were filthy and have bed bugs and infestations of that manner, who maybe
Mm.
were not educated. And she was able to use good language with the educated folks, and she was able to use language that wasn't condescending with folks that maybe had some more humble beginnings. And so
Mm.
that really instilled in me an approach to life that didn't judge people based on economic class, education, and those kinds of things, but also got me really interested in politics and looking at candidates and policies and things that were probably atypical for a kiddo my age growing up.
Right, right. And I love that language, how you're saying she held space. That's such a powerful phrase, I think, especially right now when we're trying to, in American history, trying to bridge some of these, differences that we have, and whatever they may be, there's an element of holding space. So I really appreciate that language around that. And
Yeah.
that gets me thinking then in relationship to, as you aged, what were some of your early how you kind of first manifested some of that work, I guess, in your own life.
Yes. So I actually was a philosophy major in college, had thought about going to law school, but I have a condition called delayed convergence, which the short version of that story is I can see the beginning and the ending of a word, but I can't see the middle because my eyes don't converge. And so I read from context, and my mind kind of tells me what that word should be. And so I was a very slow reader.
Yeah.
And at the time I would have gone to law school, there wasn't a lot of assistive technology.
Right.
So I didn't end up going that route. Did a little bit of graduate work in public administration, got involved with probation administration,
Mhm.
working there, and then got into some nonprofit management, which led me to the mediation world and to where I am now,
Right.
working in community mediation.
So it sounds like what you did was sort of a path where you said, I'd want to serve, so I'm going to serve through my career path. Is that what, is that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be an accurate description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's zip ahead a little bit further. So now, we're in the current times we're in. Why have you landed on the hub building work? What drew you to that initially?
Yeah. In my capacity as director here at Mediation West, I've been involved with NAFCM and other national organizations and started receiving invitations to connect with national groups that were working in this space.
Mhm.
And I got to see a lot of different approaches that people were taking to this work. Activism means something different to different people. Direct action versus dialogue, for example, block, build, bridge. And so, as a mediator, as I'm sitting with folks and kind of learning their approaches to things, it really was a perfect fit for me to think about this holding space idea, like we were talking about a little bit ago.
Yeah.
And I really have a desire to create space where people can share their lived experience. Um, in mediation in the past, we used to talk a lot about creating safe space for people. And I don't like to use that term because I really can't understand what it makes a safe space for you or not. But if I
Mm,
can offer to you a brave space where you can come and not have to fear retaliation because you're sharing your worldview, then that's a huge win. I think that we gain empathy when we're hearing how other people have had their lived experience. And you need to hear your neighbor's story to be able to have that empathy. And right now, we're in a space where people don't always feel like they can have that conversation. Like I say, they fear retaliation, what other people are going to misunderstand or what other people are going to think about them.
mhm.
And I think that's really at the core of what drives me in the work.
That's a beautiful mission, and I like the phrase "brave space." I like that.
Yeah,
Because it's
definitely.
encouraging people to kind of step outside of their comfort zone a little bit while knowing that they're in a secure environment where that's okay to do. So that's awesome. That's a really, really powerful way of putting it. In fact, I decided I'm stealing that.
Okay. Yeah, I love the R&D method, the rip off and duplicate, because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it
The
works
caring is
really well.
sharing, yeah.
Definitely.
Exactly. So as you've gotten started in this hub building work, so tell me where you're at. Tell me where you're at in your process. What has it been like for you? Where have you found some challenges? Where have you found your successes?
Yeah, yeah. So thinking on the success side of things, as I've had the opportunity to hold space with different people, come to these different convenings, I think that I'm finding a lot of people who are similarly minded and that they want to support this type of work across the country. And people seem to understand at the basis of what they're doing that we can't come up with one big national solution and we're going to publish this and it's going to be a one size fits all approach and we're going to fix our country. People really do seem to understand that we need to think differently and bridge the resources of our national and state organizations, and then bridge that with the local organizations that have trust in their communities, that have the capacity to engage the community in ways that fit their needs really well. And I think that Nebraska um, provides kind of a nice metaphor for the way I'm thinking about this. So in Nebraska, we have a Office of Dispute Resolution that oversees six independent nonprofit mediation centers, and we each have a certain number of counties. So my center has 15 counties.
Mhm.
And the thing that I really like about that is we have fidelity in our programming and what we're doing because of our Office of Dispute Resolution. I say they provide us like the hamburger, right? But then because we're each our own standalone nonprofit, we get to put the toppings on the hamburger that fit our community. So in rural Scotts Bluff, my center operates a little bit differently than urban Omaha does, but we're still able to meet the needs of our community while offering this kind of fidelity.
Right.
And I think that the folks that I'm working with on the national stage that are looking at hubs, that are looking at these civil discourse opportunities, are understanding that much the same way. Like, how can we provide structure, but how can we empower you on the local level to really implement it in a way that's going to be meaningful for your community?
So important to keep that in mind. And I know that's, like you said, I mean, that's a key element of what I hear as I not only interview people for this program, but also in the other work that I do, is that we have to maintain our focus on the local, right? And
Yeah.
keeping people engaged, but yet offering support, structure, those kinds of things. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, what kind of activities have you been doing so far? What draws people in terms of the actual, like, hey, we're getting together, what do we do, kind of stuff?
Yeah, so we are at the beginning stages of this, having those initial conversations, trying to figure out what it looks like, and that probably goes into some of the challenges that we're finding a little bit.
Hmm.
To think about our place in history right now, one of the things that's been at the top of my mind with my work with NAFCM is that this is a really critical juncture because the basis of community mediation is really Section 10 of the Civil Rights Act.
Mm,
And with the Community Relations Service through the Department of Justice being defunded and having an administration that's asserting that the Civil Rights Act has kind of completed all of its goals, we really are standing as the last beacon for
mm,
upholding and carrying out the precepts of that section, which, in a nutshell, are people should engage conflict at the earliest stage possible
hmm.
and at the people who are closest to it. And
Yeah.
so that's a challenging time that we find ourselves in. I think the
Mm,
other thing is that's challenging in this work is there's a lot of people that were wanting to engage in this right now, and we are needing to think about new ways that we can really collaborate and utilize time, talent, and treasure of
mm,
everybody to best complete the work. And I think about there's an example I heard one time. There's a religious leader by the name of Dieter F. Uchtdorf, and he told a story one time about they were trying to move a grand piano in a church building, and the way he told the story was kind of envisioning maybe they had to lift it over some kind of a divider or something. And they worked and worked and worked on this thing forever. And then finally he said, "Brethren, lift where you stand." And
mm.
everybody just lifted where they stood and the piano moved where they needed it to, right? And I think
Yeah.
we're kind of maybe in that place with our work where we need to lift where we stand um, and think about um, we're talking about communities and wanting them to think about what's unique about them and what their approaches need to be. And I think organizations need to do the same thing. We need to think about
Hmm.
our uniqueness. What is it that we can offer as an organization that nobody else can? And then we need to ask ourselves, how does that align with, or how does that enhance what other groups are already doing so that we're strengthening and lifting each other up
Yeah.
instead of competing with each other. And I
Hmm.
think this is the stage where we're really finding ourselves right now at Mediation West. We're trying to figure out what is it that Mediation West uniquely can do that no one else in our community can, and how do we use that to enhance what's already going on instead of
Right.
approaching people and making them feel like we're trying to take over
Yep.
and
Yep.
do that. And I think this is really valuable for us as an organization, and I think it'll be really valuable for our community as too. And then we can lift where we stand, and the other organization next to us are lifting where they stand, and so forth. And we're going to really have much more leverage in the community than if we were all siloing and trying to do this work on our own.
Well, now I've got a second phrase I'm going to steal from you. It's somehow lift where you stand. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And to me, it speaks to the heart of so much of the history of grassroots endeavors in the United States. You know, in eras previous where the connectivity in terms of communication wasn't as, you know, every day where you could find out what's going on in Nebraska when you're in Michigan or wherever as easily.
yeah,
You know, that was organic. And I think we just have to remind ourselves sort of turn off the perception that whereas we're more connected to the national or global than we really are, you know, in a day-to-day
yeah,
sense. You know, we live where our feet are, you know, that's really a powerful thing. And so lift where you stand plays right into that for sure. Yeah, I love that.
yeah.
So now, you know, you've got clearly got these endeavors going on. You're getting going, you know, where you're at. What are some of your short term and then what are some of your long term hopes for hub making, you know, in general for your area, but also, you know, to say more broadly for our republic's democracy?
Yeah, yeah. So thinking about that question, my mind goes to what I guess I would call the kind of the fly overview, like what would my vision for the future be? And I would hope that if we're successful at this, we are seeing people come to the realization that democracy means more than just voting, right? Like there's an active process that people need to be involved in if they're really going to maintain their democracy. I think one of the biggest aha moments for me over the past couple years, I had an opportunity to meet with a group in Birmingham, Alabama, and we toured the Phillips house. And Dr. Phillips was a pharmacist in the area, lived a couple doors down from Martin Luther King Jr., and invited people into his home who did planning for things like the Freedom Rides. And the thing that really struck me as I was speaking with descendants there and touring Birmingham is these were just normal everyday people that decided they needed to do something, and it wasn't always pretty and it wasn't always perfect, but they took a step forward and they did that. And I hope that people will realize that they need to do more than just vote, and I hope that they're willing to take that step even when it might be a little scary or might be a little bit unknown.
Hmm.
um, as
Yeah.
I think about the kind of community that I hope we have if we're successful in this endeavor, is I
Right.
really hope we see a community full of people who can be themselves, right? That they don't feel threatened if their neighbor is deciding to live differently than they do. They don't feel threatened if they're choosing to live differently than their neighbor. And just really having people shift away from this mindset of, oh, you think differently than me, you must be my enemy, but
Hmm.
helping people come to a different place. And I think that being in a part of the country where people are very self-reliant, where they're kind of keep to themselves and maybe have those opinions of other people that are just coming from a place of not really truly understanding them. Like I
Hmm.
hope people come to a place where they realize that kindness does not equate to weakness, and we can treat people with respect, and we can be side by side with people who choose to live differently than we do. And it doesn't mean that we're necessarily condoning what they're doing. It doesn't mean that we're giving up on what we believe in. It just
Right.
means we understand that their life's path has taken them somewhere different than ours, and
Hmm.
we can still be neighbors.
Right. And that's sort of the heart of e pluribus unum, you know,
Yeah,
that the out of many one idea, and certainly reflects a thread in American identity around the sense of independence too, although we're certainly all interdependent. But that idea of forging your own, well, the baseline of liberty to be able to forge, that which is your own destiny, your own journey. Obviously, we do it with a lot of other supports in our lives, but ultimately
Mhm.
that sort of self-defined path to the best of one's ability, and acknowledging that others have that right, within obviously reasons, but with have that right as well,
And
to
I think that's probably why we're seeing so much angst in our country, because people really value that agency and that ability to determine things for themselves. And I think thinking about the people that are around me, they get squirrely when they feel that agency is being threatened, right?
yeah,
And so,
yeah,
how do we help people have conversations and understand just because somebody's living differently than you doesn't mean that they're trying to change you necessarily. They just want to be able to do their own thing the same way you do, and help people
exactly.
understand that agency better.
Yeah, and we used to have a better intuitive understanding of that. And, I'm sure we could dissect
Yeah.
this like out the gazoo, but, we definitely there's at least a correlation between the rise of the nature of modern 21st century communication technologies and that siloing effect. We know that because the algorithms and all those other kinds of things. I mean,
Yeah.
it's definitely well studied, but how much we can sort of reclaim that understanding is going to, I think, depend a lot on actually conversations just like this, where people are like, "Oh, well, no, I actually do feel that way," or that's how I feel too," and realizing they're not alone in feeling that way. They just may have the fear to have those braver conversations to, you know,
Yeah.
make things work a little more smoothly and effectively for the local, win-wins, if you as much as possible for what's going on in a local area, like like we were talking about earlier, for sure. Yeah, any other
Yeah.
thoughts on that question?
You cut out there, sorry.
Oh, any other thoughts on that question?
Um,
So of like, hopes for, how about like
yeah.
maybe longer term hopes, things like that?
Yeah. So one of the things for our situation specifically, we're working with a group called Civic Nebraska, who's a statewide organization who has been doing work kind of adjacent to this for quite a few years. And they have a person within the organization that's designated to work with the rural areas of the state. And so, what we're looking at through this hub experience is um, looking at this as an experiment, I guess, looking at our community mediation center with them as a statewide organization, and then with Better Together America as a national organization. How does this work, this collaboration, because it becomes more than a partnership? What can we do on the local level that helps support Civic Nebraska? What can Civic Nebraska do on the state level to support us? How can we both be fed by BTA? How can we
Mhm.
also send things back up the food chain, so to speak, to BTA so that lessons we're learning can be applied in other areas, or
Yeah.
adapted for other areas? And so I think that that's an important part of what I'm hoping to get out of this from like a convener perspective,
Hmm.
more than just that community perspective.
Right
And
on. Yeah.
um, the other thing that I haven't gotten down the road very far to think about, but definitely will be a part of this, is how can we take the lessons we're learning here and apply them to other communities in our region, in our state, and how can we keep this going? And, eventually I'm not going to be here. Eventually my counterpart from Civic Nebraska is not going to be here. Like, everybody has their life cycle, right? So how do you set things up so that you've got people who are passionate and engaged and willing to keep this going in the future, so that
Hmm.
these conversations don't die out? And
And we
so,
repeat the kind of negative cycle again, potentially. Yeah.
yeah, so thinking through sustainability at some point, once
Mm.
we kind of perfect the wheel, how do we keep it rolling?
Right on. Well, and it's the heart of how grassroots action historically, when you look at different movements and you study the history and how they operate and how they work, it's the heart of how things were done historically. It's just we don't have Zoom and we don't either. Historically, we didn't have Zoom
Yeah.
and all that. So yeah, definitely what I love about having these conversations with people all across the country is I get to see the way grassroots democracy is thriving right now.
Mm.
Or I should say more so grassroots efforts and also remembering that we are a republic, and as a republic that is also a federation, uh, that the states matter, and that the state level work really matters. So to not forget that we are a federal republic, and that federal aspect does matter to how we craft and work civically across the country, and again anchoring it to where our feet are for sure.
Yeah.
So that with that aim on the future in mind,
Yeah.
so let's. I always ask my guests to leave a little message to the future. Part of what we're trying to do is not only capture stories, for the now to people for benefit from, but for future generations to see the work, not only the hearts and not only the minds, excuse me, of the people, but the hearts of people that are doing this work in this time in history.
Mm.
And so, what would you like future generations? I always like aim it towards like middle school students. They're definitely more open, I think, in terms of civics and that kind of stuff. So, what
Mm.
would you tell future, say, middle school students about these efforts to preserve and advance, our republic's democracy in the early 21st century?
Yeah. I
What do you want
think,
them to know, I guess is what I'd say.
yeah, I think I'd want them to understand the environment in which we came to the work.
Mm,
That we came to this work at a time of a perfect storm. Like you mentioned earlier, when technology has created this scenario where it's possible to be isolated from other people, be isolated from other ideas, where sometimes we're unaware
mm,
of the fact that we're being fed a singular story, but also sometimes that we chose to seek out the views that corresponded with what our thoughts were at the time, even to the exclusion of other ideas.
yeah.
I think I want them to understand we're coming to this at a time when the education system focused on passing standardized tests instead of processing a problem solving um, type of we're making critical analysis
Hmm.
is less common, and confirmation bias is a lot more prevalent.
And
I
civics
think,
not taught as much.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'd want them to understand we're here at a time when religion has been increasingly less influential,
Mm,
and extremist groups gave people a sense of belonging and purpose, both
yeah.
on both on the ultra conservative and on the ultra liberal side.
Yeah.
I'd want them to understand that we've come to this work at a time where we're asking people to choose more than report to the ballot box, and helping people understand that democracy is an action word in a way
Mhm.
that we haven't had to for several decades before now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that I would want them to also understand we're asking people to do this in a time where they're needing to kind of reinvent the wheel, because those groups that struggled in the past, in a lot of ways, failed to pass down the details of their struggles. I think out of hopes for preserving the feelings of the next generation, like not having them feel bad about what their parents had to go through, but
Yeah.
also some important lessons didn't get passed down.
Yeah.
Um, and I think from my perspective, as somebody in community mediation, I think I want them to understand that this is all happening at a time where community mediation and civic hubs are really a perfect shelter from the storm, because we're coming to the work with the capacity to connect people, to create space for empathy, and to help heal those misunderstandings that have prevailed at this time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I think that we help people go deeper. And by doing that, we help people find shared values instead of staying in a positional argument up here. We're digging a little bit deeper and um, finding ways where we have those like values, and it helps us live side by side. And besides just living side by side, it really helps us to um, engage people in solving complex problems
Yes.
with the perspectives of as many people as we can, one step at a time. So you're getting these different perspectives. Complex problems require complex solutions, right? But you don't need to see the solution to the problem all at once. Like we talked about earlier, lift where you stand, take the first step and see where it leads you, and continue to get the input of those people around you.
Mm.
And so while hopefully, 50 or 100 years from now, when they're learning about this, everybody's like, well, that's a no-brainer. But for now, this is
Job
something
done,
that we
right?
still, yeah, it's still something we're really having to help people realize for themselves, because I mean, not to use it in a derogatory way, but we've become lazy in our democracy. We figure we vote every 2 or 4 years and we've done our part,
Hmm.
and we're helping people understand it's more than that. And that's scary, especially when you're afraid your perspective may come with some retaliation from the people around
True.
you.
True. And really helping people understand their civic identity, that like you said, it's not just voting, but it's about how you show up for your community, how you show up for the problems that, are, and the celebrations that are going
Yeah.
on around you. Yeah, absolutely. I really like how you put that. Is there anything else you want to leave our viewers with for the moment? Any other kind of closing thoughts?
Um, I think that the thing that I'm noticing now that I've been working with folks in this space for a few years is, because we're up against a lot, I'm starting to see people get fatigued. I'm
Mm,
starting to see people get frustrated and feel like maybe they don't know where to go next. And I would just encourage people, and say that's normal to get frustrated when you feel like your role's being slowed a little bit, or things aren't working out perfectly in front of you. But doing something is doing better than doing nothing. And if you're
mhm.
not if you're not making mistakes, it means you're not doing something. So just keep pressing forward, and do your
Yeah.
best to engage those around you. And let's help bring healing to our families and our organizations and our communities, and ultimately our country and world.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's wonderful. Thank you for your thoughts today, Charles. I really appreciate meeting
Thanks for
you.
having me
And
on. I appreciate it
yeah,
very much.
and we'll follow up. As time goes on, we'll have you back on and we'll hear more of the journey, hear more about what you're doing and more of the specifics, and just sort of keep this conversation going as the years ahead unfold. And we work on doing this thing called the experiment in democracy, right? Just keep on keeping on. So for
Yeah.
our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today. This program was produced by the Waging Dialogue Project in collaboration with Better Together America. We look forward to having you join us again for another episode of DIYing America.